Entries. So many people have submitted abstracts for this section, and it's great to see 5 students ready to share their rapid fire presentations with you. We'll be doing each of the presentations, and then we have questions at the end for all of the presenters. So hang on to your questions, make a note of them, and then we'll go round at the end. So I'd like to introduce, first of all, is Matthew Kelleher of Winchester University, and his project was on ADHD adults' perceptions of physiotherapy and how it can be more inclusive. So welcome to the stage, Matthew.
Good morning, everyone. First of all, I'm very excited to be here in front of you and be able to speak about my project, which I completed for my dissertation in my 3rd year. Recently graduated, but I feel it's a very important topic, so let's begin. So ADHD is a neurodevelopmental disorder which affects roughly 3.1% of adults. Though presentation can vary significantly, ADHD is characterized by hyperactivity, impulsivity, and/or inattention. In adults, this commonly manifests as difficulties in prioritization, organization, focusing, and forgetfulness. ADHD has been shown to have wide-reaching effects on social, functional, and health outcomes across the lifespan, including an instance of a vast array of health conditions, not limited to chronic pain, fibromyalgia, increased incidence of accidents and injuries compared to their non-ADHD counterparts. Symptoms of ADHD have been observed to present a significant barrier to ADHD adults' physical activity, which is a core part of musculoskeletal physiotherapy treatment. However, little is understood about how ADHD affects physiotherapy experiences or outcomes. So this study sought to explore the physiotherapy experiences of ADHD adults and look into some of the views on how physiotherapy could be more inclusive of ADHD. So this study followed a phenomenological sequential mixed methods design to try and capture a sort of richer narrative within a previously unexplored area. An online questionnaire featuring 5-point Likert scales was devised to try and cover a breadth of the physiotherapy experience. 3 text boxes were also included at the end of each section to allow greater detail to be provided relating to these areas. This questionnaire was disseminated through social media using specific ADHD subreddits and Facebook groups. So from that questionnaire, an initial thematic analysis was completed of the 3 text boxes to try and identify areas which warranted further exploration, considering there's nothing really to go off for. There needed to be at least some form of data-led data collection within the study. This informed the creation of an interview guide, particularly targeting the general experience, ADHD as a factor in that experience, their perceptions of it, how inclusive physiotherapy was, and also looking at what physiotherapists might need to know or should know about ADHD. So semi-structured interview participants were recruited via an opt-in form following the online questionnaire, and these lasted roughly 45 minutes each. So moving on to data analysis. So quantitative data was processed using SPSS, and Spearman's row tests were used to assess for correlation between the questionnaire domains. And Mann-Whitney U-tests were used to assess different experiences, differences in experience based on whether a participant's physiotherapist was aware they had ADHD or not. The free text and interview transcripts were then combined and analysed using reflective thematic analysis. So the results, so 50 participants were included in the online questionnaire, with 5 continuing through to the semi-structured interviews. And though most participants reported positive overall experiences, 60% of participants somewhat or strongly disagreed that their physiotherapist understood how ADHD may impact their treatment. What is likely the strongest point from this study is 75% of the participants finding adhering to exercise somewhat or very difficult, with 94% of all participants considering the ADHD to have been a factor in the difficulty. There was a significant and moderate positive relationship between overall experience and perceived knowledge of physiotherapists. So the reflexive thematic analysis of 3 text boxes and interview transcripts revealed 4 main themes. A feeling of being misunderstood and unsupported by a physiotherapist, which stemmed from 3 areas. The lack of opportunity to actually discuss the ADHD with their physiotherapist, whether not being asked or not feeling they should bring it up because they thought they were already asked the relevant questions, a lack of knowledge from the physiotherapist, or a lack of meaningful action if the ADHD was discussed. The impacts of physiotherapy were most clearly seen in exercise adherence and difficulty with managing this aspect of physiotherapy, though further impacts were highlighted during appointments, with the setting lending itself to distractions, particularly considering the very thin curtains that we often have our patients behind. The most concerning theme was disengagement of some participants from their physiotherapy, with their difficulty participating causing a sense of pointlessness or hopelessness, and ultimately leading to them either self-discharging or not attending appointments. The final theme of how physiotherapy could be more inclusive didn't really give much, there's not much of a prescription I can give you for it, but really placed importance on developing an understanding of what ADHD is and how it could affect those who are attending your setting, and being able to generate a conversation around what difficulties they may face and what support they may benefit from. So the takeaway points from this study really are that ADHD adults consider ADHD to be a substantial factor in their physiotherapy experience, and there appears to be an unmet need of this patient group, and considering the poorer outcomes and associated health costs, it also presents an exciting area for future research if we can improve both outcomes and reduce costs. There's a perception by ADHD adults that physiotherapists don't have sufficient knowledge of ADHD, though this is not unique to our health profession. And considering the lack of training available and complete lack of previous research, it will make it very difficult for us to gain that knowledge in the first place. I guess now for future research, I'm going to be continuing with a master's now and looking at physiotherapists' knowledge and understanding of physiotherapy themselves to try and work out whether there's still a gap or if there's a gap there. And I think we should all consider our professional responsibility of how we approach our patients and make sure that we're giving treatments in a way that each patient can access, rather than the number of times seen the noting not adhering to treatment, or I suppose there's another thing to think about. Essentially, I believe there could be a significant impact on this patient group and on funding as well if we were to look a bit deeper into it. Thank you very much for listening. Come find me as well if you want to chat about it.
Thank you, Matthew. I'd next like to introduce Roo Satkunaraja. She's from King's College London, and she's going to talk to us about her project on practice-based learning within health and justice, within the health and justice sector, a London review. Thank you, Roo. Welcome.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Roo, and I'm in the last few weeks of my physio MSc at King's College London. So I completed a 5-week leadership placements with 2 other students, Ed and Zoe, last December with NHS England. Our project looked at practice-based learning, so placements, or I'll abbreviate to PBL, within the health and justice sector in England. London and England, but mainly focused on London. Imagine a world hidden behind locked doors where healthcare needs are as complex as the system itself. The health and justice sector isn't just about prisons. It's a vast network of settings, each with its own unique challenges and opportunities. From the high security walls of prisons and YOIs, young offender institutions, to the temporary holding areas of immigration removal centres and custody suites, from the critical support provided by sexual assault referral centres, to the transitional care of liaison and diversion services and the Reconnect programme. Even the specialised environments of secure mental health services fall under this umbrella. Each setting represents not just a placement opportunity, but a chance to make a real difference in the lives of some of society's most vulnerable individuals. There is a growing number of pre-registration learners, and not just for physiotherapy. Our project looked at nursing, midwifery, and all 14 allied health professionals. There is also a critical shortage of PBL opportunities, and NHSE identified health and justice as an underutilised sector for PBL expansion. Expanding in this sector could not only address the placement shortage, but also potentially improve understaffing in health and justice, enhance care quality, and influence students' choices, with studies showing that early exposure to specific settings can significantly impact our career choices. Our project consisted of 3 key components. First, we conducted a retrospective analysis of placement data from 2020 to 2023 using summary statistics. We researched and mapped the health and justice sector across London. And finally, we collated a database of 79 different stakeholders, engaged with 24 of them by conducting semi-structured conversations, which informed a preliminary thematic analysis. This multi-pronged approach provided us with a rich understanding of the current landscape and potential opportunities within our timeframe. Delving a bit more into my component on this project, extensive research was required to create this Google custom map, visualizing the network of all the health and justice sector sites I could find across London, with an overlay of the 5 integrated care boards. Each pin represents a different health and justice site, highlighting the geographical spread of opportunities. To bridge this work with data analysis, a dashboard prototype allowed to illustrate the extent of placements in the sector. Visual insights into which higher education institutions, HEIs, NHS and non-NHS sites, and professional streams were engaging in H&J placements could be seen, along with where gaps for expansion may exist. During 2022 to 2023, we found that occupational therapists at Broadmoor Hospital accrued the most placement hours, and notably there was no physio placements in this sector, and our profession had the least hours in England. For sake of time, I won't go into detail, but the far left chart shows the distribution of healthcare commissioning and PBL utilisation in London's prisons and YOIs. All PBL occurred at NHS sites despite mixed commissioning, and only 33 potential sites were seen to be utilised. This visual summarises our preliminary thematic analysis. Key barriers include complex vetting processes for security reasons, and facilitators involve clinicians advocating to students and dispelling misconceptions. These findings highlighted the need for better communication and collaboration to expand opportunities in the sector. Our project has bridged gaps in understanding PBL expansion in the health and justice sector. We've mapped potential sites, gained insights into complex healthcare provision, and identified expansion opportunities. Our key outcomes so far include a well-attended stakeholder webinar, establishment of an expert H&J review panel, new placements already occurring in Met Police custody suites, and very recently, findings potentially being useful in informing national policy development. The sector clearly offers unique learning opportunities for physiotherapy students with potential to impact multiple groups positively. I hope this has piqued your interest in non-traditional physiotherapy placements and also shown you the fruits of a leadership placement. Thank you for your time.
So a warm welcome to our next speaker, Ellie Lewis, who's from Southampton University, and she is going to be talking about the association between isometric knee extensor strength at 20 degrees and 90 degrees measured using a handheld dynamometer in recreationally active adults.
Good morning, everyone. So today I will be presenting my research for my dissertation entitled The Association Between Isometric Knee Extensor Strength at 20 degrees and 90 degrees, measured using a handheld dynamometer, which from now on I'll refer to as an HHD, as it's a bit of a mouthful, in recreationally active adults. Our overarching aim of the project and the purpose behind the research is to investigate whether the 20-degree test is a suitable alternative to the standard 90-degree test by examining the association between isometric knee extensor strength at 20 degrees and 90 degrees in our target population. Quadriceps strength forms the foundation for optimal performance and functionality in countless activities, ranging from daily tasks to high-intensity sports. As a foundation for optimal performance and functionality, quadriceps strength is therefore pertinent as a metric, and isometric strength testing is a suitable option for this. However, in terms of measurement of quad strength, research tends to use equipment such as an isokinetic dynamometer, which has limited usability, namely due to its high cost and lack of portability. A handheld dynamometer was therefore developed to counteract the drawbacks of this. However, a research study by Martin et al. In 2006 stated that results from an HHD could lack reliability in comparison to isokinetic dynamometry, possibly due to the rater's lack of strength, hence why research with using an HHD tended to be use specialist equipment and optimize the participants' HHD tend to be used in impaired populations. Additionally to this, tests using an HHD tended to use specialist equipment to optimize the participants' positioning, thus limiting its ability to be repeated in clinical settings. This is therefore why we chose the 20-degree test as a comparative tool, as we were able to minimize the rater effects by putting them in a stronger position, whilst also positioning the participant with equipment that can be found in daily clinical settings. However, for our research, we recruited a convenience sample of 50 participants with a 30 to 70% male to female split respectively, who fit the inclusion and exclusion criteria shown on the screen. Participants completed a 90-degree and 20-degree isometric knee extensor strength test measured using a HHD. During the 90-degree test, shown in picture B, participants sat on a custom-built chair with their hips and knees positioned at 90 degrees flexion and their arms crossed over their chest. At 20 degrees, a supine position was used to minimize the difficulty of maintaining the 20-degree angle of the knee in sitting, as shown in picture A. The participant flexed their dominant knee to 20 degrees, and this position was maintained through the placement of roll towel just below their knee. From these tests, the maximum of the 3 trials was used to calculate their peak torque. Raw data from the trials show the discrepancy in peak torque values at each angle. At 90 degrees, the overall peak torque was 172.8 Newton meters, and at 20 degrees, it was 82.6. Figure A also graphically shows these discrepancies with gender breakdown and standard deviations. The scatter plot in Figure B displays the excellent correlation within the full sample between peak torque at 90 degrees and 20 degrees. This data therefore shows that the 20-degree test will limit the rater's force required during the test, increasing reliability, whilst also correlating with the 90-degree standard and well-researched test. The excellent correlation of results is further proven through the correlational analysis using Spearman's rank, which generated a correlation coefficient of 0.81. Further statistical tests were then completed to evidence the repeatability of the test at 90 degrees and 20 degrees. The data was acquired through using the intra-class correlation, which revealed a coefficient of 0.9 at 20 degrees, higher than that of 0.81 at 90 degrees. This therefore could confirm the increased repeatability and reliability of the 20-degree test due to the 0.09 discrepancy likely attributed to the biomechanical disadvantage of the quadriceps at 20 degrees, reducing the requirement for the rater to exceed the participant's force. Examining the association between these two tests was crucial due to the gaps in literature and challenges in producing a reliable 90-degree test. Martin et al. In 2006 identified observer bias, as the quadriceps are stronger in this position, hindering the effective counter-resistance and test stability. These findings align with studies by Shimura et al. In 2017 and Muff et al. In 2016, which suggest that reliability improves when the participant's muscle group is weaker than the rater. So, to conclude, our research has shown that the 20-degree test might be a suitable alternative to the standard 90-degree test, as it allows researchers to capture the same aspect of knee extensor strength, as shown in the Spearman's rank coefficient correlational value of 0.81. It also holds several advantages, including its easy application in various clinical and non-clinical environments, its accessibility to a wider range of populations, and its high repeatability, shown through the intra-class correlation, making it a practical choice for clinicians and suitable for diverse populations. Thank you for listening.
So a warm welcome to our next speaker, Katrina Beard, who's going to be talking about the impact of printed postpartum educational material on self-efficacy and readability and mixed method analysis.
Patient education and self-care strategies demonstrate great potential in the prevention and management of postnatal pelvic floor dysfunction. But to ensure their success and equal benefit for all, these postnatal or postpartum educational materials must be accessible to patients with low health literacy and limited English proficiency, as these patients are vulnerable to experiencing health inequalities and poorer health outcomes. That leads me to the purpose of my study. Unfortunately, the readability of gynecological educational materials has consistently been shown to exceed national recommendations of a reading age of 9 to 11 years old. And despite self-care being an integral part of the postnatal period, there's sparse literature investigating the impact of education on a mother's perceived ability to care for themselves and not just their baby. Therefore, the aims of my study were 1, to assess the impact of an educational postnatal self-care poster and leaflet on a mother's perceived self-efficacy in caring for their bodies postpartum. And secondly, to assess the readability of these materials. I used a mixed methods cross-sectional survey design. 40 participants were conveniently recruited from a postnatal unit in the NHS, and 39 participants were included in analysis. The poster and leaflet intervention provided information on bladder and bowel care, wound care, and pelvic floor muscle exercises as per national guidelines. The main instrument was a 14-item survey questionnaire, which measured perceived self-efficacy and perceived readability with a 5-point Likert scale. I also included open-ended and demographic questions for further analysis, and readability was objectively assessed using the average reading level consensus calculator. So if we move on to results. Firstly, with regards to demographics, over 84% of my participants were predominantly from minority ethnic backgrounds, with the majority identifying as Asian British, and over 69% spoke English as a second language. So looking at mothers' perceived self-efficacy, the mode was very confident, so that's scoring 5 on the Likert across all 5 self-care domains. Now looking at overall confidence, so that's points 4 and 5 on the Likert combined, we can see that participants felt most confident in bladder care, closely followed by bowel care, caring for stitches, and noticing signs of infection. This is certainly reassuring when it comes to reducing postnatal health complications and reliance on healthcare practitioners during this time. The area of least confidence, however, was performing pelvic floor muscle exercises, really highlighting that we need to provide a range of educational modalities to ensure confidence in our patients with these exercises. Moving on to perceived readability, the mode was very easy to read, that's 5 on the Likert, and the materials were shown to have a reading age of 10 to 11 years old, in line with national NHS England guidelines. 100% of participants would recommend the materials, and over 96% reported improved knowledge post-intervention. In conclusion, the postnatal educational model was found to be in line with national readability guidelines and accessible to individuals with English as a second language and low health literacy. It was also associated with high self-efficacy and improved knowledge, and was highly rated by participants, thus indicating its suitable use as a clinical intervention. So what's next? Well, the materials have since been endorsed by the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, and I hope the model can be used nationally across NHS trusts. But I also want to use this study to drive wider change, and this is where you come in. Readability is easily assessed and modified, and is free to do so on readabilityformulas.com. The next time you provide a patient with educational materials, I really urge you to check and assess the readability of that information. It's only as successful as it is accessible, and I hope together we can make patient education more accessible to those who need it the most. Thank you so much for listening.
So a warm welcome to our last speaker for this session, to Phoebe Lau, who's from London South Bank University, and who's going to be talking about the relationship between socioeconomic indicators and pelvic floor strength in Paris Women, a systematic review.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for that introduction. I hope this follows nicely on from Kristen's abstract. So I'll be talking about the relationship between the socioeconomic indicators and pelvic floor strength in women. And I'll be going through the background and purpose, methods used for the systematic review, the results, and give my conclusions and recommendations. So firstly, I would like to define some of the key words I'll be using. When talking about socioeconomic indicators, I'm focusing on education, employment, and income. And when talking about Paris women, this is women who have given birth to one or more babies. So just a bit of background. Globally, it's estimated that approximately 140 million births take place annually. A third of women experience long-term health problems after childbirth. And it is understood by current literature that those in lower socioeconomic groups have poorer health outcomes. So education, employment, and income are commonly overlooked by other risk factors such as age, body mass index, number of pregnancies, ethnicity, parity, menopause, and obesity. In women, quality of life is impacted by pregnancy and can be affected by changes in pelvic floor functions after childbirth. A systematic review was conducted following the PRISM guidelines. The inclusion criteria were adult women having one or more births, with studies reporting on income, education, and employment, measuring the pelvic floor strength as an outcome. Interventional and experimental studies were excluded, for example, if participants were participating in pelvic floor exercise programs. A period of 10 years was searched across scientific journal databases, Medline, CINAHL, Academic Search Complete, and including Google Scholar. So quality appraisal and risk of bias was assessed using Access Tool, and quality validation using a modified grade of recommendation, assessment, development, and evaluation, or grade, for cross-sectional studies was used. Finally, a narrative synthesis was conducted. Overall, a total of 25,000 participants were included over 7 studies. Participants were from China, Brazil, South Korea, Norway, and Turkey. Studies consisted of Paris women who've given birth vaginally and by cesarean. Socioeconomic indicators varied across the studies. In education, there were positive correlation between the number of years education against a woman's pelvic floor strength when giving birth vaginally. A higher number of educational years had a higher pelvic floor strength. On the contrary, it was founded by some studies that women who gave birth by cesarean section with 12 or more years of education had lower pelvic floor strength. This may have been contributed by factoring the longer someone who has been in education, the older their age. Employment was found to have mixed effect when comparing against women in different countries. For example, employed or women in unpaid jobs who gave birth vaginally in Turkey and Brazil had lower pelvic floor strength. However, in Brazil, women who gave birth by cesarean in an unpaid job had higher pelvic floor strength, which is similar to those in South Korea, where women without a job had a higher pelvic floor strength. Income was found to have no significant effect with smaller sample sizes. So to conclude, and some of my recommendations, the findings in the systematic review suggest that economics and social determinants of health, such as education, play a role in the overall pelvic floor health postnatally. The variation in the outcome measures used in the included studies made it challenging to draw on comparisons, further implicating findings. A person's level of education could be a barrier to healthcare. I want to start with the clinical recommendation. Going forward, Reproducible, validated outcome measures, such as perionometers and digital palpation, should be utilised more widely, and with 2 or more measures to be considered for accuracy. And my second recommendation is in research, and this is for investigations to go into longitudinal changes using standardised socioeconomic quantitative measures to allow for transnational comparison of countries in similar GDPs. Both recommendations would allow to inform government strategies for early education of pelvic floor dysfunction in women postnatally. Thank you.
Thank you to all our speakers. So I'd like to open it up for questions now. So the questions can be addressed to any of our speakers. Do we have any online yet? Oh, we've got someone in the room over there.
This is a bit of a broad, perhaps non-specific question. Obviously, this is a great platform for students who are perhaps undertaking or about to undertake research and potentially paving the way for that as a career, hopefully bridging the gap between practice and evidence. But for the students who have presented today, for those students who are about to undertake this, what is the process in terms of that you've gone through in order to be here today, and how have you found that process through your experiences?
Can you hear me? Cool. It was an okay process. I suppose the main thing was getting the research done in the first place. Once you've done that, you probably have a really good grounding and understanding of what you've done. And really, it was almost as simple as submitting an abstract. And as part of that, we were able to get some support from a couple of members of CSP as well to sort of talk us through what we would need to do to submit that abstract, what they're sort of looking for as well. But yeah, essentially, it was you do the research, or you have something you want to talk about, you put together an abstract through an online portal and send it off. But there is support out there as well from people to do it. So I found it okay. Yeah.
Cheers. So a question for Rue. Obviously, you've opened the doors and found lots of opportunities for placements in health and justice. Have you found any particular areas that potential current students in the room could start looking right now that won't have too many barriers? Obviously, you mentioned that there'd be vetting processes and ideal student, things like that. Have you got any recommendations where we should all start looking?
That's a really good question. First of all, that was a very impressive catch. Yeah, I think in terms of opportunities for physio students in London, it's not, like I said, from the findings that we had between 2022 to 2023, there obviously wasn't a lot of activity happening at that time. But there have been, I'm not 100% sure if the custody suite placements within the Met Police are physio placements necessarily, but what I would say is if you've got any contacts that you can talk to at your higher education institution and express that you've got this interest, as well as it's quite complex with healthcare commissioning because there's some health and justice sector sites that are commissioned by NHS and some that are by private, independent and third-party organisations. So it's about, if you know a site that you might be interested that maybe is close to you, it's also about maybe finding out who the provider is, and then it's a couple of, you have to communicate with a few different people in the process. So you're maybe someone at your HEI, like a placement, module lead, or whoever it is, and also someone at the site you might be interested in and have a real look around. I would say, if you look on LinkedIn and there's anyone working as a H&J like clinician within a site as well, that might be a really nice way to link in with someone and get a bit of insight, and they might have a bit more, like contact details of someone that could help you out with that as well. But yeah, in terms of physio placements, it's quite limited, and I think there's real scope for expansion there. I hope that answers your question.
Thanks. We've got a question online for Matt, actually, for Matthew. It says here, is there research on professionals with ADHD and how the CSP can help towards making the profession easier for these people?
I believe that more recently there have been sort of bits put out by the CSP about how to support people who are neurodiverse or have other disabilities that they may need support with. Another good place to look would be ADHD UK, the charity, who provide essentially, it's almost a workbook that you can go through yourself and with an employer to sort of help understand what support you might need in work. My research primarily targeted looking at patients and their experiences physiotherapy, but I suppose that's where I'd start, definitely. But yeah, the CSP I think is doing well in that aspect, providing support and advice. Yeah.
Hi, just a big thank you to all the speakers. They're all really interesting presentations. My question's for Katrina. I was just wondering, in terms of how you created the resources, how did you make them accessible to people? Did you use like a PPI group where you spoke to patients and said, what would you like in this information? How did you go about that?
Yeah, so I designed the materials, the way I designed the materials specifically for individuals with low health literacy or limited English proficiency. My kind of primary design feature was to make them as visual as I possibly could, so really making use of diagrams and being very mindful in the sentence structure and language, making sure that's modified. And if you use a readability calculator, it will break down like your whole sentence structure, the words, how many words, the length of your words. So that's a really useful tool. But the materials were also, yes, they went through maternity governance, and they also went through a maternal neonatal group as well. And I received feedback to modify and change those so that they met the needs of the people they're designed for.
This one is for Rue. It actually leads on from the question that we had over here earlier. I approached a secure hospital in Manchester for an elective placement, and they were happy to take me, but because of the system that we have in place in the Northwest, because it was an NHS-based service, I couldn't take the placement up. So I suppose the question is there plans to actually take this on further, and are they actually going to use that to choose placements in the future for people, or is it something that we're going to keep having that kind of barrier because it's NHS and because it's the Northwest? You can't do it, and that's just the way it's going to be, or is that something that they're going to look at changing?
I kind of missed the part where you said what the actual... So the barrier was that...
The barrier was that because it was elective, in Manchester, in the Northwest, we're not allowed to have elective placements inside the NHS because of the sharing of placements between the universities. So I suppose, is that a problem in London? Is that a similar kind of thing? And if it is, are they going to work against that? Are they going to try and figure that out so people can go on placements in those kind of areas?
Honestly, I'm not 100% sure on that, because I know that certain higher education institutions have certain contracts that they need to, in terms of placements, that they need to fulfill. I know that in London, I mean, I myself, and I know people that have been on non-NHS placements, but I know as far as placements within health and justice and like expanding the capacity for placements, I feel like what's happening, I could be wrong, but what I think is happening is they're trialling it, and especially focusing in on London, and then almost being able to take that further out into England. But as far as specifically as Manchester, I'm not 100% sure, if I'm honest. But yeah, thank you.
Hi, my question is for Matthew. You mentioned that adults with ADHD had difficulty with exercise adherence. Do you know is due to kind of like neurologic aspect or motricity aspect?
Sorry, neurologic or what?
Aspect. Kind of like, is it the neuro side of being not like having a lack of concentration, or is it kind of a motricity thing?
Yeah, so ADHD is a neurodevelopmental disorder. Essentially, the way it affects the brain is mostly in sort of prefrontal cortex. That's where a lot of your executive function happens, and it's to do with those pathways that are essentially due to lack of neurotransmitters, or the way the brain's working specifically at that level, can interfere with the way we are able to prioritize or prevent ourselves from being distracted from things. And it's not because there's a lack of thought and such going on, it's just that almost directing it at times. So when it comes to patients who are potentially giving exercises and then sending home, it's a lot to do with that distractibility. At least that's what came out of my research, that people were finding either it's they weren't remembering to do it, or they were struggling with retaining the information that they actually had in the appointment because they had a huge amount thrown at them and weren't given resources or given support on how to fit things within their day, or essentially make the treatment accessible to them. So it's very much, in my experience by my research, it comes from the person has ADHD. ADHD affects them in a certain way within their brain, and it's not. Essentially, yes, it's neurological, or at least it's very much brain-led.
Just to finish, because if you see, I'm going to do something a bit quite similar. And what I have found, I don't know if you have found the same as well. Do you think there's kind of like a correlation between neurodivergence and dyspraxia?
Within the research I've read, there is a correlation between a number of different neurodiverse conditions and dyspraxia, dyslexia. A lot of these things tend to be comorbid within patients. So if you have one, it's quite often you might have another one. So when it comes to dyspraxia and you have developmental coordination disorder and such, that there seems to be a link between it. So people with ADHD potentially may have poor balance or struggle to take on movements quite as well. But come talk to me 100%. I'd like to chat with you, please.
Okay.
Does that answer your question, though? No.
Yeah.
Okay.
We can take one more question. We've got time for one more. Yeah, there.
Sorry, just to continue on from the question you were just asked, you mentioned something about, sorry, Matthew, you mentioned something about them forgetting. Do you have any recommendations for what could be done for people when it's a genuine, they've forgotten to do them because it's out of sight, out of mind?
So lots of different people with ADHD will probably develop some coping mechanisms over the years anyway, whether it's alarms or other such things, but unfortunately sometimes you can just become distracted from those. I'll just turn this alarm off and I'll do it in a minute, or something else needs to be done. But from what I found within the interviews was they were talking about things like apps or having reminders or having check-ins with a physio, or taking that time to sort of understand the person's day and how things might actually fit in, so you can almost like bundle stuff together as a cue. So when I'm doing, like when I'm brushing my teeth, I stand on one leg, that kind of thing. And I think that was a big element. It's about those coping mechanisms. But for us as physios, I mean, we're meant to be experts in our area, and although we can't know everything, but I think at least understanding well enough how we can support adults with ADHD in how to access our expertise or what we're giving them to do. I think that's something we could do better on, essentially. But bundling, I think, is a big thing there.
Questions. We do have to wrap it up now, I'm afraid, but I'm sure our speakers won't mind you approaching them in the breaks. I'm looking at them for nods. So if you do have any burning questions, do come and find them. I'm sure they'd love to talk more about their research with you. And just follow on from the first question quickly, somebody asked about being able to, how to share their research in future years and how to be one of these people at the platform. The CSP does offer some great support in terms of webinars for how to create a scientific poster, how to write abstracts, So do look out for those when they come around, because they're designed to prepare you for submitting your abstract to conference and getting your research out there. And we do want to see research projects from students being disseminated. It's so important. We don't want to see that research and that work you've done wasted. So do look out for those opportunities. I'm from the Physiotherapy Research Society. We offer mentorship, and we work with the CSP as well to support these webinars when we can. So look out for us as well, and we will be around to speak to, as I'm sure the other CSP members and officials will be, to answer any questions about that. But thank you, everybody, and I'm not sure what's next. Is it break time? It's break time, so enjoy.